Hello and welcome to Squiz.com, the connected marketplace. For this episode 4, I'll be showing you some of the latest changes that we've made to the platform in the past few weeks. I'll be covering a number of small improvements we've made, but first I'm going to be talking about a brand new feature that we've added that allows an organization selling through Squiz.com to be able to automate the process of getting the goods that are purchased off to the freight carriers in an automated fashion. By doing this, it allows a number of warehouse and shipping processes to become automated, cutting down on manual data entry, reducing errors, saving time and money, and that's for both the supplying organization as well as for the customer because they can now receive the goods quicker due to less processing going on. To give you an example of how this feature can be used, I have set up two organizations within Squiz.com. We have Springfield Police and we also have the Quickie Mart. So the Quickie Mart is the supplier and they're going to be supplying donuts to the Springfield Police. Now I have a diagram here that shows exactly how this process works. So here's Squiz.com and then the Quickie Mart, the supplying organization, they have in their own computer network, they have a business system that stores all the information about their sales and purchases. So this business system could be an accounting system, it could be an enterprise resource planning system, it could be a warehouse management system, or it could be just any piece of software that stores business related information such as a database or a spreadsheet or a CSV file. In the opposite, we have Springfield Police, which have also their own computer network as well. So they have their own business system that stores all the sales and purchases that they make throughout the day. And then those two organizations are hooked together through using the Squiz.com connector software, and then they're connected into Squiz. Using Squiz, we can allow order data to flow through from Springfield Police across to Quickie Mart. So that's the example that we're going to be showing today. So in Springfield Police, they have a purchase order which would live in their business system somewhere. And somebody, when they wanted to buy more donuts, say it's a police officer or it's their procurement managing officer, they would create a purchase order. And that says, I want to buy more donuts. So Springfield Police need to get this purchase order across into Quickie Mart's system, and they can do that in an automated fashion through Squiz.com. So the process is the purchasing officer would go into Squiz.com, retrieve the purchase order from their system, the purchase order then flows into Squiz, and then they convert it into a sales order. Now this sales order is a sales order for the Quickie Mart system, and then Squiz.com can push that sales order through into Quickie Mart's business system through going through the connector software, and that can live there. Now that's great because it's cut out all the manual data entry that a person would otherwise have to do if they were manually keying in the sales order based on the purchase order that Springfield Police sent them through email, fax, or verbally over the phone. Now this sales order has an intent from Springfield Police to buy certain goods. Now, the next extension of that is that somebody within the Quickie Mart warehouse would have to go find, in this case, the donuts, give them to a freight provider who can then drive around and deliver the goods back to Springfield Police. And this is where we come into the new feature that has been built into the platform to automate the separate order that gets sent to the freight carrier in order to achieve this. So in Squiz.com, we have added an extra dimension to this workflow. We have integrated a freight provider called SmartFreight, which automates a number of processes around getting orders and particularly consignment notes that are generated into the various freight providers that Quickie Mart deals with. So SmartFreight have integrations into freight carriers such as Australia Post, TNT, Star Trek, and so on. Then Quickie Mart can negotiate with each of these freight carriers which they want to use in order to, in this case, deliver their donuts or any other confectionery. So SmartFreight have taken the hard work of doing the integrations, which you can then leverage through Squiz.com in order to allow the orders to automatically flow through. So if we go back a step, when the sales order is created in Squiz.com, there's now the ability to split out the sales order so it's sent to both Quickie Mart and then on to SmartFreight. When this happens, a freight order is created for the sales order, and then Squiz will send a freight order across into SmartFreight, as well as the sales order going into Quickie-Mart, and then that freight order will then get pushed across into the SmartFreight app, which is installed in Quickie-Mart's computer network. Now, the SmartFreight software allows in the warehouse staff to see that there is a order that needs to be delivered, and that gets converted then into a consignment note. So once the warehouse staff are happy that they've got all the goods, in this case the donuts, all packaged up, then that consignment note is completed, and then that can be sent using the SmartFreight software across into the freight carrier, which is then told Quickie-Mart has some goods that need to be delivered. This gives you a broad overview of how a purchase order travels through to Squiz, turns into a sales order, and then also turns into a freight order, which then gets turned into a consignment note, and then gets passed onto the freight carrier. And all that work is done in an automated fashion through these links that have been set up. That's the theory. Now to show you an example in the platform in real life. If I go back into squiz.com, I have Clancy here, who is the purchasing officer of Springfield Police, and he's going to go through the order procurement process in order to get a purchase order he's raised into his system to can be sent across as a sales order into Quickie-Mart's system. First, we'll do it without the freight orders, and then I'll show you how you can turn that on and have that working. So Clancy, he already is connected to the Springfield Police since he would have created that, and he has permissions in order to go through its supplier accounts. He finds the Quickie-Mart supplier account. He then goes in the purchase orders, and then he searches for purchase orders. Because he has connected up his business system into Squiz, it makes a live request in real time to it in order to retrieve the purchase orders. So in this case, we have order 39. Then we can go down to the order, click the Procure Orders button, and what it will do, it will request to get all the details of this order from that from their system, their business system in real time. So in this case, we can see that there are two order lines for two different kind of donuts. So in Springfield Police's system, we have this product called Red Donuts, and then we have a corresponding product called Pink Donuts. So they've ordered 10 red donuts and 10 pink donuts, and these have been translated into the Quickie-Mart's products. So they have a product called Blue Donuts, and they have a product called Pink Donuts. So somebody previously has done worked out the mappings between the two organizations. The Squiz has been able to detect that based on previous orders. So Clancy will go through, just check that all the information is correct. He will verify the order. Then Squiz has now created the Quickie-Mart sales order, so we can view that. So here's the actual order. There's the delivery details. There's the order lines, and it's also calculated some additional freight surcharges. So in this case, an extra $234, and so that the final order total is $569. So if we go back to the sales order, now all Clancy has to do is confirm that he's happy with that, and then he submits that order. So that order will then get it sent across into Quickie-Mart's system, which can be sent on to their business system. So if we go into Abu, so he would be the manager of the Quickie-Mart, and he would have the permissions. Then he will receive a notification when the new order comes in. So in this case, it's one new notification, and he's saying he can see that Clancy Wiggum has submitted the order, how much it is, and see the information about that order. Now, so if Quickie-Mart wants to send that across as the order also in SmartFreight and into their warehouse, then they would have to set that up within the organization profile. So if we go into that and go into the admin area, then there's a new icon that's been added called Freight Providers. So if you click on that, already I've added a freight provider called SmartFreight, but you can add as many providers as you want. So you need to give each provider a code, a unique code that identifies that provider for that organization. Give it a label that is helpful for others to know. Then you can set when the freight order is created from the sales order, who will be the sender of that order. So it could be the supplier. So in this case, Quickie-Mart, they could be marked as the sender, which will appear on the label that goes out with the freight, with the goods. Or it could be the billing address in the order. So based on the billing address that, in this case, Springfield Police has set that this order needs to be billed to. It could be if the order is marked as a dropship order, so that means that the customer ordering it wants the order to go to their own customer, then you could put in this case, you could put in Springfield Police's billing address if it's a dropship order, or else you could put in Quickie Mart as the billing address. So that gives you that option there. And also, if the order's addresses matches, then you can set the Quickie Mart as being the sender, or you could not have any sender set at all. So there's a few different options in SmartFreight on who you could set as being the sender of the actual goods being delivered. And you may want to do that because you may not want the supplier actually be known by the end consuming organization or person. We've got this is active state, and that means if this freight provider is not active, you can keep the settings stored in Squiz, but there's no chance of this freight provider being used in order to send goods off to a relevant freight carrier. Now we've got this provider type called SmartFreight, because that's what this service we're going to be using. In the future, we may be adding more providers to it as well. Now, SmartFreight have a whole bunch of settings, which is unique to their system. So you need to put in a user ID of their system, a password. So you would get this information once you've set up an account with SmartFreight. They have different order import modes. So we're using currently the partial mode, and partial means that when the order is sent to SmartFreight, that they will not automatically send it across to the carrier, that somebody in the warehouse using the SmartFreight software needs to review the freight order and the relevant consignment note first and approve that before it actually gets sent to the freight carrier who's going to deliver the goods. In the future, we'll be adding more modes to this system as well. We can put in a reference ID, so that way once the orders come up in SmartFreight, you can see a unique identifier in those orders. You can put in date formatting that's not applicable at this point. And we have these default values, so that way we know how are the goods going to be actually boxed up and shipped out across the truck or the train or the ship. So these settings, it's whether you're talking to SmartFreight guys when you're setting up your account to see what is your default. And then also, if you're going to be setting the supplier, you can change the name. So in Quickie Mart, they could be sending the goods, but they don't want their name, Quickie Mart, to appear on the label that is stuck to the goods themselves. They may want a different name, such as confectionery company, for instance, that does appear on the label. So you can change the name of the organization, or the supplying organization, to something else if this is set to the supplier options. And this could be very much applicable if you've got multiple organizations that are supplying goods and you want to see that this consistent name is appearing on the stickers that appear with the goods that are shipped. So once that has been set up, so you can create as up to 10 freight providers within Squiz. So you could have different accounts set up in SmartFreight based on different regions in the world that you're going to be using Squiz for to deliver the goods. So we could add one region, could be an Australian SmartFreight account, which deals with only one or two freight carriers. And then you could set up a second account that could be used in a different region, such as the UK. Now, for each provider, we need to also specify freight units. And freight units is how the goods in a given order, how are they going to be shipped in? How are they going to be boxed? So in this case, I've set up two different freight units. So we have cartons and we have pallets. So if we go into the details of both, so each freight unit, you can set up a unique code, and that's to be unique between all the different kinds of freight units. And you can put a label that provides a more meaningful information about what that freight unit is. And you can also specify how much cubic meters does that freight unit cover. And that's going to be important for calculations, so that way when a sales order comes in, Squiz can look at all the ordered products and go, all right, if this carton is 2 cubic meters, but there have been 4 cubic meters of goods ordered, then Squiz knows that there needs to be 2 cartons that are going to be used in order to deliver these goods. So it's important that you get your volume set to be as accurate as possible to allow Squiz to be accurate as well. And the other setting is an active setting. So once again, if you're not wanting to use that freight unit, well, you can just set it as inactive, and Squiz will ignore trying to look for that freight unit if it has to. And then you can activate it any time in the future. So you can have several freight units assigned to one given freight provider, as we can see here. Now, once that has been set up, then the final piece of the puzzle is within the sales order rules. So in here, we can set different rules on how certain aspects of the order are altered or configured. And one of those things that we can set is this new we can add a rule that says, set the freight provider for any sales order that's created in against the Quickie Mart organization to be, in this case, the freight provider that has the freight code SMFreight. And then we can set another rule that says, all right, if the freight provider is SMFreight, then set the freight unit to be a pallet. Now you can come up with all different kind of complex rules on what decides which freight provider should be used to deliver a goods for a specific order and what unit should that be placed in. So we might want to put a conditional rule that checks to see if an aspect of an order is met before we decide that we want to use, say, pallets as opposed to cartons. So to do that, I would add an if rule, and I would go, if the, let's just pick an example. If the delivery postcode is equal to the number 3065, then you can add multiple conditions as well. So you might want to go, when the order contains a delivery address with this postcode and the region name is, say, Victoria, then it will put in this if condition, and then you can put in child rules that will dictate what happens to the order. So in this case, we want to put in action rule, so we want to assign something or modify the order in some way. So in this case, we put in a new rule that says we want to set the freight unit to be what we set before, which was carton, I believe was the freight code. And now what this says is when an order is created, it'll go through all these different rules and it'll get to here and go, is the specific order have the postcode 3065? And if that is yes, as well as the state name is equal to Victoria, then set the freight unit to carton. So this will override the change that was, or the rule that was put in place here that says set the freight unit to pallet. But it will only write it when these specific conditions have been met. You can have up to 200 different rules in this manager that allows you to tailor how freight is going to be calculated, as well as how the freight units are going to be set and who's going to be actually delivering the goods. So an example here is I've got a folder that contains all these different rules that does a whole bunch of different calculations to determine, in this case, how surcharges are also being added to the order. So we have this thing, a surcharge called web freight, and it's going to say, I'm going to set this web freight surcharge to be $10. So it's $10 extra that the user must pay when an order meets, in this case, these conditions, which there are no conditions, so it's just going to automatically apply it. Then it's going to another rule that says, well, I'm going to add an extra $5 on top of that to the original $10 we put in. So if you have conditionals in here, we can have if the order volume is over a certain amount, then we can set the freights to be $13 instead. And if it's a given location, or we can even assign a location, so it could be a location within the Quickie Mart, so they may have 2 stores, so you may want the order to go to one store as opposed to another store, and their ERP system can handle that. So it gives you a high-level overview of how flexible and customizable these sales order rules can be set up. And in this case, we're using it to control which freight provider and which freight unit the goods are going to be delivered with. Now, you can test these rules out as well if you have a sales order already created. In that case, you just need to know the order code. So if I go back into a previous order, if we just go and view an order, we can get the sales order number, close the dialog, go back to the freight sales order rules, then we can click on the test order rules and put in that code. Now what it's going to do is it's going to run through these rules. It's going to tell you which order they ran at and what are the results of these rules that are set. So in this case, after doing these rules for this sales order, the freight would be calculated at $234 ex-tax or $257 ink tax, and there would be a credit card fee of 0 set. And the freight provider would be set to SmartFreight, so that's our SmartFreight provider we set up earlier, and the freight unit would be set to be a pallet. So we know for this order, the goods would be delivered in a pallet using SmartFreight as the provider, which is exactly what we want in this case. So if you go through here, you can see there are these numbers that tell you the order in which the rules went through. So we have these loops that you can go through many times and test out many conditions based on different values. You can see the results of if you have conditional rules. So in this case, these rules failed for when it looped through the 5th and 6th step through the rules. And because of that, you can see that it didn't try to then execute these actions rules here. And it continues on. So this is a great easy way to test out, are the rules you're setting up based on where you're selling, how the surcharge which you're applying against your orders, the locations, and the freight providers are all being configured through the functionality that is available. And this makes it nice and easy to alter and adjust the rules as you start using the system. With our sales rules, order rules set up, we can now test this out by the next time an order gets submitted, and seeing if that order was sent onto SmartFreight. So if we look at an example that I've previously sent, if we go into the Quickie Mart, so we go into sales orders, we can see that for this order, there's a new label that appears called freight order status. And in this case, it's saying that this order was sent across to a freight provider as well, being sent across to Quickie Mart's relevant business system. So if we go into the order, there's an additional section called dispatching, which shows, and now you can see the information about what has been, what came up. So we have a consignment number that created for the relevant order. We have the reference number. So in this case, this is SmartFreight's reference number. We know the order of the status, so that was successfully sent to SmartFreight. And then the freight unit was the pallet, and in this case, it was 200 pallets at 4 meters cubed was the freight unit quantity that was sent for this specific order. And then the other part we have here is it tells you the date on which that sales order was, the order was sent as a freight order to SmartFreight. Now, if for any reason an order could not be submitted to SmartFreight because maybe the internet connection between the two systems was down, or maybe there's an incorrect configuration, then this freight order status would be set as unsent, and then you have an option to click the resend button, which would send the order again through to SmartFreight, which would then go into the software into the warehouse. Additionally, there would be a notification that would appear, so we'd get something like this saying, so for Abu, he would be notified if that freight order and which specific order could not be sent and the reason why it could not be sent as well. So it allows the warehouse staff, if they're listening for sales order notifications, to be kept in the loop of what's going on in this case. Now, the final aspect to this freight provider and freight order integration is the address information itself. So for SmartFreight's system, they're very strict on the data that they need for the billing address to allow the order to be sent off to the freight carriers. And sometimes pulling out purchase order data from different systems may not be in an ideal structure. So the standards that Squiz use, there are 3 address fields. as well as a state, country, and postcode fields, and finally a contact fields. For some systems, they store all this information in one field within the purchase order. Now, to get around this problem, in this case, if Springfield Police have only one field to store all the information, whereas SmartFreight requires that the address information to be split up, we have developed a feature which is available for any organization's profile in the organization settings, which allows the Squiz platform will try to clean up the purchase order delivery address information. So there's a setting here called clean imported sales order addresses. When this is set to on, Squiz will alter the address information, pulling out the state/region. It will pull out the postcode. It will pull out the country from the address information and put it into the correct fields to allow SmartFreight to be able to send and create the consignment note. So the way that works in effect, if we go back to the order, an order that previously gets created. So here's Clancy. So if we look at order 39, currently all this address information is on one address line. This is not ideal. So with that setting turned on, when Clancy from Springfield Police procures the order, it's at this point in time where Squiz will go through the order delivery address information and split out the state, country, and postcode information to their own fields. Now you can see, if I show you the original order, so in this case, this order came from a spreadsheet file, and I'll just open that up here. So I have a file called supplier account purchase order. So this is where all that purchase order data I have configured through the connector from Springfield Police's system. And here's the case where this delivery address information is stored all on the one field. Squiz is going to go through and go, all right, here's the postcode 3003, so we're going to stick that then into a postcode field, which would be available in the standards, and it's going to find out if a region, in this case state, has a 3-digit name, then it can also detect that and stick that back into the correct field that's available. So we can see this in effect happening because the original address had Vic, whereas if we look in Squiz, it's actually substituted in Victoria again because it was able to find the correct state. The same for the country Australia and the postcode information. It's important to check and make sure that the correct address information is within the purchase orders in the first place, but if it's unordered if it's ordered in the incorrect fashion, then Squiz can try to help and fix up the data entry, and over time we'll be further refining the way in which it can do that stuff. So once again, I'll continue through the procurement process. So we see here, you'll be able to see the address information. So you can see there it's been split up, the postcode's been able to be extracted out, and the order is good to go, and there should be no problem submitting that order across the SmartFreight now. This shows you now how the supplying organization can use this freight integration feature in order to have the sales order information also flow through to the carriers and cut out a lot of the manual data entry that would previously happen. Next, I'm going to be talking about a few of the small improvements we've made to the platform. One of them has been with modified trading tokens. So just to give you a recap, trading tokens can be purchased by organizations, and when transactions occur throughout the platform, such as selling goods and services and creating sales orders as well as purchase orders, or when data is imported into the platform, we debit an amount off the trading token balance for each organization. The trading tokens support the servers and system and resources required to run the platform, as well as not having to put in any advertising into the platform, and in which we all are not big fans of. One of the improvements we've made is within the organization profile is that if your trading tokens get low, you can define a level in which you consider what is low. So in this case, we have 50,000 trading tokens, or that is the equivalent of 500 Australian dollars. Then a notification will be sent out advising the nominated person within the organization or several people within the organization that the trading tokens are low. And the same will happen when the trading token balance goes down to zero and more transactions aren't allowed to take place. So these notifications will appear in the notification area, and now will look like these notifications here saying that the Quickie Mart is under 5,000, in this case 50,000 trading tokens, and do you want to purchase more trading tokens, as well as view the transactions that cause these trading tokens to be debited. So we can see here a lot of these transactions were to do with new sales orders being created. We've also changed the price at which trading tokens are debited for sales orders and purchase orders. So if you go into the help section and then you scroll down to the trading tokens, you can find out the costs of the transactions that occur through Squiz. So we've reduced for sales order data imports the cost down to only 50 tokens plus 0.5% of the order total, capped at 4,000 tokens. So what that means is, in the equivalent of dollars terms, if somebody, in this case Springfield Police, if they purchase off Quickie Mart, that will generate a sales order, and Quickie Mart will be charged at 50 tokens plus 5% of that order, which would mean $1 for that order, or 1% of the order total would be taken out in terms of trading tokens. So we've reduced that from, which was previously 100 tokens, and the rate was 0.4% of an order. So what we've done is reduce the amount that it costs in order to create sales orders and purchase orders through the platform, which is going to help suppliers, especially when there's orders of lower value. The next improvement I'm going to be talking about is related to conversations. So within this conversation, in this case we have Homer that is also within the conversation. So now you can click on Homer's name and then you can view details of Homer. Now if Abu wasn't connected to Homer, there would be a connect button that would come up that would allow him to connect. So even this is a way for people to find other people that they don't necessarily know the email address of that person. Which is a great way to do introductions. So you just add the people you know into a conversation, then those other people can find each other by clicking on their name and clicking the connect button. We've made some minor adjustments to the profile of organizations, so now there's more icons to represent the different data that an organization can import into Squiz and have stored, as you can see here. Additionally, we've added icons to the Google or the Android apps, as well as the Apple apps that we released in the previous month, so that way you can easily find and download those apps and start using them. We've also fixed a bug that we found with sending contact requests to people not already on the platform. So if you typed in a person's email and had sent that out, so let's just say example at example.com, if that was sent to a corporate email server, such as say example.com was a corporate email server, the person at the other end may not have received that email. So we've made a fix on our outgoing email servers to make sure that we can pass their spam filters. And if you have any difficulties, please let us know. Additionally, we also fixed a bug where if a new organization notification came up, it would always be the number 1, even if you had multiple notifications. So we fixed that issue so it shows the correct count as well. So that gives you a wrap-up of this release. So if you find any issues while using the platform, please let us know on the feeds, and we can have a look into it and make any required adjustments. Until then, happy squizzing!